Good morning. So the reading today is a Lucan Psalter translation. And so some of you may be unfamiliar with this translation like myself. So I did a little research and AI's out there and kind of compiles all this great stuff. So I thought I'd just share with you a little bit about the translation because it was helpful for me before I read the scripture. So this is what the internet has out there. It says, a Lucan Psalter is not a specific Bible translation, but rather a collection of psalms compiled and translated for liturgical use, particularly within the traditions like the Order of St. Luke, which emphasizes praying the psalms for spiritual growth and a wide range of human emotions before God. And so it's meant to make the Psalms more accessible and relevant and translating them into a modern, accessible language for devotional purposes. And a Lucan Psalter's goal is to facilitate prayer and reflection, helping users connect with the broad emotional and spiritual range of the Psalms in their personal and communal devotional lives. So here is the psalm reading in the Lucan Psalter translation, Psalm 72, verses 1 through 7, and verses 10 through 14. O God, give your anointed one your judgment and your justice. Teach your chosen one to govern your people rightly and bring justice to the oppressed. The mountains will bring the people peace, and the little hills bring justice. Your anointed will defend the oppressed among the people, save the children of the poor, and crush the oppressor. The reign of your anointed will endure as long as the sun and moon throughout all generations. The rule of the chosen one will be like rain coming down on the meadow, like showers watering the earth. Justice will flower through the days, and abundance of peace till the moon shall be no more. Tarshish and the isles will offer gifts. Arabah and Sheba will bring tribute. All rulers will pay homage, and all the nations will serve your anointed. Your anointed will rescue the poor when they cry out, and the oppressed when there is no one to help them. Your chosen will take pity on the lowly and the poor, and will save their lives. Your chosen one will rescue them all from violence and oppression, and will treat their blood as precious.
In this series, we have a guest composer. Richard Bruxfort Cooligan is a modern-day interpreter of the Psalms, a psalmist. As in our theme song written by Richard, God is Holding Your Life, his songs have an easy-to-sing chorus that help bring the message into our voices and our hearts. In this one, the chorus is, these lives are precious, we know. Here is an introduction from Richard and his variation of the song.
Hi friends, it's Richard. I want to invite you into a song for Psalm 72. Psalm 72 is an interesting one. It seems like back in the day this song was written as a coronation hymn, a blessing for a king. The leader that they are singing about, that they're asking God to bless, was a remarkable person. Listen to this. This king was compassionate and generous and always looking for justice for his people. This person paid attention to the poor, it says, the lowly, those living with violence. This king paid attention to the most vulnerable in society. Psalm 72 invites us to think about who is most vulnerable in our society right now, in the world, in your neighborhood, in your circle of friends, or in your family. Who is most vulnerable? And what would it be like to be as compassionate and generous as this king? The text says, "You are like rain showering down on the farmland, so that up in the mountains where the fields grow, food will come up. That food is justice for everyone." This song is called "These Lives Are Precious," and it comes from a line, where is it here? That says, "The King redeems their lives from oppression and violence. Their blood is precious in his eyes." The most vulnerable of us, we can say, these lives are precious.
You're the goodness raining on the farmland. Your peace sprouting in the mountain fields. You're a harvest of the love and justice, ripening to feed and heal. These lives are precious. These lives are precious, you know. These lives are precious. Oh, these lives are precious, you know. Help the one whose neck is being stepped on. Knock down the oppressor, it's your vow. Help the one who's helpless in the moment. Do the act of justice now. These lives are precious. These lives are precious, you know. These lives are precious. All these lives are precious, you know. These lives are precious. These lives are precious, you know. These lives are precious. All these lives are precious, you know. Push against the hatred they have taught us. Away with the systematic fear. Help the one whose neck is being stepped on. Shower rain upon the fields. These lives are precious. These lives are precious, you know. These lives are precious. All these lives are precious, you know. These lives are precious. These lives are precious, you know. These lives are precious. All these lives are precious, you know.
As a foundation for this psalm, Marcia McPhee shares these words, echoing what Richard said in his video. This is likely a psalm written to be repeated at coronations of kings. She goes on to say, the attributes of a just and righteous king are listed after the first line, indicates that we are about to hear just how the ruler will be judged and by what conditions justice shall be offered back to the king. Goodness begets more goodness. The more we discover the exchange of belovedness and praise between the holy and creation, the more we live in a state of knowing and accepting our own beloved nature and desire that for all people. Our video featured images of tender plants that need water and sun to grow. Can we imagine that all people with their tender hearts are yearning for such care and sustenance? That we are yearning for that kind of care and sustenance? Do we believe that lives are precious and a bit precarious and in need of tender care? And how will we live that out in this season? Whenever there are necks stepped upon, whether physically, economically, or socially, the whole society suffers. So we are invited to pray for the kind of rule of the land which honors each precious life, and invited to know, to remember that we are loved and called to love in extraordinary ways. Many of you know from my Facebook posts and some of what I've shared in our Thursday devotionals that I like to garden. I find it particularly satisfying to go out after the winter months to till and dig in the dirt, to smell the wet earth, to add ashes from our fire pit or from our compost, to add nutrients to the soil. I love going to the garden section at Home Depot and Lowe's and Fred Meyer and imagining how these little saplings and seedlings will take off in my garden, how there'll be such abundance in my backyard by the time August and September roll around. And so I go and I till the earth and I add the nutrients and I plant my seeds and we run the water lines, and then kind of like my crock pot that I like to set and forget, I like to set and forget my garden. I think if I've planted it and I've run the water lines, that between the sprinkler system and the sun and the mystery and magic of photosynthesis and the power of dirt, there should be fruit and vegetables. I think for some of you, that's how it works. That's not how it works at my house. At least it wasn't this year or last year or the year before that. Instead, I go out to my garden, which is supposed to be now flourishing after 2 weeks with water and the sun, and my poor, pitiful plants are not doing so well. So I take the hose and I water them and I wonder what's going on, but I live a busy life, and so I don't take that much time to actually figure out what's going on. And so I poke them along. There's not much that's flourishing. Shishitos and cherry tomatoes are generally fairly generous. The rest was a little bit reluctant. And then meanwhile, down the hill, we live up on the plateau, there's a big house on the hill, and they have this big, long property. They've added goats and fencing in the last couple of years. And this year, they sort of used a tractor out there, and then they had this big mound of manure put out, and they moved it, and then they put their plastic lining down, all very intentional and meticulous and fine. The neighbor said it was an experiment, and she puts her little plants in the ground, and 2 weeks later, those things are going gangbusters. And I go back out to my plants that have now been in the ground for 8 weeks, and they're still this big and not doing so well. Fortunately, Rick indulges my hobbies, and so he helped figure out that the valve had been turned off. It doesn't water real well when you do that, just pro tip right there. So we turned the valve back on, and I figured now at this point my garden will be glorious. Not so much. But I still go out and I water it and I weed it and I put nutrients on and I have hope for it. And then I take these stupid sticker bush things that grow out there in the wild and I have to take them out. And again, a week later, take them out. Weeding is my least favorite part of gardening. And eventually there's fruit. Still plenty of cherry tomatoes. Now I've got these beef eaters that are like the size of a grapefruit. I have one piece of corn. I have 5 cucumbers and I think 6 onions. It's amazing back there. So much fruit of the earth to enjoy. And I have this squash plant. I don't even remember which kind it was, maybe a butternut or a spaghetti squash, but it grew out like my neighbor's. It's all over. It's probably got 12 feet of squash vines, and it puts out these yellow buds, and I think there's going to be squash. It's been 3 months, and I have no squash. I don't really know what the problem is, but something is not quite right. Well, all of that takes me to God's care and God's tending of us and God's nurture of us. And I think sometimes when we struggle, at least when I struggle, I think God's kind of like me. and had a set it and forget it approach. Just kind of like put things into motion and walked away, and I'll be back in 6 weeks and I hope there's some fruit there. And I have to remember that's not who God is. God is an attentive and masterful garden who has that green thumb, the beautiful touch, and to be fair, is subject to the same things that we are. The environment around us, extreme heat, a cold freeze that takes all the blooms off your fruit tree. Sometimes God thinks things should be working just fine, and somehow somebody turned the valve off. And so all of us that are supposed to be watered and nourished and fruitful are struggling, and some of us feel like we're dying on the vine. In this series, I want us to be mindful that we need to be cared for, nurtured, nourished, and tended. And we have a master gardener who is willing to do that work with us. And part of that master gardener's work is our relationality, that we have to be open and receptive. We have to be willing to participate with God for God to do those blessings in our lives. And so as we sort of orient ourselves around this new theme, as we settle into the next 7 weeks of worship, I want to ask you to do the self-reflection that says, how do I feel in the garden right now? Are you fortunate, like my neighbor's plants, and you're flourishing and you're bearing fruit and you're doing great and this feels like the best season ever? Or do you feel neglected and forgotten and dried out like more poor little plants do in my backyard? Or maybe you're like that one special squash plant where you feel like on the surface everything is great. I look like I'm growing well. I'm even blooming out. I've got this proof that something's about to happen, and yet somehow the fruit that I thought would be coming in this season is simply not. And I don't know what the mystery of it is. I don't know what the fix is. How are you feeling now? In this moment, in this time, in this season? And what is it that you think you need in order to flourish? What is the prayer of your heart that God would offer you as a gift of grace? Is it extra nutrients in the form of relationships or spiritual practice? Is it a holy rhythm? Is it less intrusion? Some of us feel like the weeds are taking over and we don't have any space to grow because there's all this stuff that shouldn't be there right now. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And what is the prayer of your heart for what you need? As we turn to Holy Communion, we are mindful that as a church, as a denomination, as a body, we consider it a gift of grace, a means of grace, a way by which God does nurture and bless and care for us. And so I invite you as you come for the bread and the juice to bring the prayer of your heart, to ask for what it is that you need in this time, on this day, in this season, so that God might nourish and nurture and tend to your spirit and to your whole being.